Thanks everyone for coming, and thank you, Paul, for being here and presenting. Paul's from Vancouver, and today he is going to be talking to us about making sure our courses and sites are available for all devices. So designing a multi-device Moodle course site. And to be honest, you know, in today's world, who doesn't have at least 2 devices? So without further ado, thanks everyone, and thank you, Paul. I'll hand over to you.
Great. Thanks very much, Teresa. Can everyone just let me know if I sound okay wherever you are, so I can get a read on things audio-wise? Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. So thanks, everybody, for joining the session today. And as Teresa commented upon, you know, most of us do have, in fact, a variety of devices these days. So let's do a quick little poll and get a sense of how many mobile devices do each of you use daily. I'd love to kind of get an idea of how many mobile devices you use in a day. Just please reply in the text box. Thank you. Jean-Marc, 3. Stuart, 4. Sarah, 3. Shalimar, 3. Okay, so lots of multi-device users. Anna, 2. Thank you. About I'm not too greedy. Right, so, ish. So, yeah, I mean, this is a real multi-device world that we live in. And so part of a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is, you know, how can we optimize our Moodle course sites for this reality of multi-devices? And I want to start a little bit, take a little bit of a back step, because obviously I'm going to share with you some of the key strengths with Moodle in terms of multi-device design. But, you know, I think it's really good for each of us to kind of always think about why are we using a particular tool currently? Because it's very easy to start using a tool and you become familiar with it, and then you just keep using it out of habit. And, you know, I think it's always good to kind of revisit why we're using a tool. And particularly when I'm talking about multi-device design on Moodle, actually a lot of things have influenced me to be interested in Moodle for a platform for multi-device course sites. Here are some of Moodle's strengths to me in terms of things that help it become actually a better tool for that. Maybe some of these things might be not what you might think of at first. I always like to look at the strengths of Moodle in terms of learning and in terms of interface, because I think they are 2 distinct things, and I think it helps, at least for me, to kind of look at it that way. So in terms of learning, you know, I think a great strength of Moodle is the discussions, the forums that it supports. In terms of network learning, which is a really big part of multi-device learning, because all our devices are connected, and they're a great platform for social networking, for social learning. So blogs and RSS feeds and Twitter are possible with Moodle, which is great. Collaboration is another thing that, you know, devices naturally support, and I think Moodle's glossary is an excellent example of that, and I'd like to show you an example as we move on a little bit further. And with user permissions, you have this really interesting mix of public stuff that everyone can see and maybe private stuff that only your students can see. And again, when you're looking at content on a mobile device, you want people to be able to really quickly access stuff. You don't have to go through user authentication unless it's really of benefit for your students. On the interface side of things, you know, we can embed third-party objects via HTML, which is really important. I'm going to show you a favorite technique of mine, hiding and showing topic sections, to kind of change the way a Moodle front page might look and give you more control, which is critical for multi-device delivery. Language pack customizations, being able to change text strings. And this is important in multi-device design because usually we have smaller spaces for labels. And so being able to tweak even just labels can help make your multi-device courses more effective on a variety of devices. And lastly, the hackability of PHP. In other words, just being able to get in there and tweak a little bit of PHP as well is very helpful. So these are some of Moodle's strengths to me in terms of learning, in terms of interface, which also relate to multi-device design. Now, Moodle 2.5 was a true milestone release. Who can tell me why Moodle 2.5 was such an important release in terms of our topic today? Free to down text box. Introduction of responsive design, for sure. So in 2.5, we saw the Bootstrap Framework integrated into Moodle Core. And this allowed us to, by default, have responsive design supported in all our pages and, in fact, in the entire Moodle interface. And I'm not going to get into any great detail about Bootstrap. I'm actually one of the developers of the themes in Moodle for Bootstrap, Bass Brand. He has a session, I think, tomorrow. And he might talk more about that on the technical side. But just to give you a broad stroke of a description here, it's a framework that allows us to have grid-based layout. It supports responsive design, so when viewed on smaller screens, the content actually kind of adapts to the screen sizes. Bootstrap has various interface components like tabs that are quite handy to use in our pages in Moodle, and as well JavaScript snippets that allow things like dialog boxes to happen. So Bootstrap is really the engine that allows us to have responsive web pages in Moodle. And, to give you an example here, this is a theme called Aardvark by Sean Dubney, and he recently released this theme with updates for using Bootstrap. And so now when you view this theme on a mobile device, it nicely adapts to that screen, the menu collapses, you get a drop-down menu upper right-hand corner, all kinds of great stuff. So there's the Aardvark theme to choose from and to use for responsive design or, from your default Moodle install. And as well, you have Elegance. Now, this is a variation of Elegance theme. And the Elegance theme, I believe, was created by Julian Ridden. And this variation of Elegance was used on our own iMoot site, as you've been enjoying, I'm sure, over the past while. And again, on a mobile device, things collapse, rearrange, and you can get things presented on a mobile screen pretty easily. Now, I've got another question for you. So you've all commented that you use a lot of devices. Are you currently supporting multi-device friendly courses? In other words, have you already started the process of kind of optimizing your Moodle course site for multi-device delivery? If you just let me know in the chat message box if you're already currently supporting that or not, that would be great. Thanks. Okay, thanks, Teresa. So you're using Essential, heading that direction. Thanks, Cheryl. Sarah, not really. Thanks. Tina, yes, good to hear. Elegance, Jean-Marc, thank you. All right, so some of you are already starting to use responsive themes. Other folks sound like they're going to go in that direction. And so, I think we're at a really interesting time right now because things are becoming actually on the front of getting your content to be delivered on a variety of devices. Things are getting fairly easy, if I could use that word, right? We have multiple themes to choose from, and content can be presented on different devices. But I think doing it well is still something we're all learning how to do better at it. Because when you put stuff on multiple devices, it's not just fitting content. It really changes the relationship between the learner, the student, and your Moodle course site. For instance, in my experience, once your students can access your material anytime, anywhere, issues like performance support, where since they can use that course site at the time that they're trying to actually solve things and doing things at the time of apply, performance support comes into play, something that maybe you haven't thought as much about with your traditional desktop site. Informal learning comes into play. Anytime that they have a bit of downtime, anytime that they have an opportunity to maybe learn a little bit of something, they'd like to be able to do that with informal learning materials on your course site. And so that comes into play. And also network learning, as I mentioned before, social learning networks, they become, again, more prominent because of the nature of mobile and multi-device stuff. So what I'd like to share with you is some of the things that I've learned along the way that have helped me make better multi-device course sites. And then I'm going to have a case study for you, and we're going to look at an actual site and go through that in more detail. So for myself, when I'm thinking about making a course multi-device optimized or friendly, if you will, I really need to think about a strategy, and by a strategy, I tend to find the classic 5 W's and 1 H is a great way to look at things. And starting off with, why am I going multi-device? What am I hoping to provide for my students that I couldn't before? What kind of problem am I going to be able to solve or opportunity? And by talking about performance support and by talking about increased learning opportunities by informal learning, I think that's an example of an opportunity, for instance. Of course, it's always important for us to know who our audience is, but once you do multi-device stuff, maybe it's important to think about the setting of your audience and what contexts are your audience going to be using your Moodle course site. Of course, we got to think about, and we should be thinking about learner goals and organizational goals. That's pretty straightforward. I mentioned context before. Also, what devices are you going to support? Are you going to support a range of screen sizes, or are you going to focus on a certain type of device, perhaps based on your school, maybe handing out iPads or not? So that's an issue that you want to think about. When do your learners want to access your course materials? What kind of intent do they have? Is offline access important or not? And finally, how? Do you have the organizational support and capabilities to actually do this and create and provide nicely optimized multi-device friendly course sites? And will you be using existing or new content? So this kind of quick little list is, I call it a strategy foundation. It's obviously not a detailed strategy. I appreciate that. But it just helps me kind of think about why I'm trying to do something in relation to going to multi-device design course-friendly sites. I also think that in our multi-device world, we should redefine mobile learning. Typically, I read definitions of mobile learning, talking about the mobility of the learner, the size of the device, and these kind of things, and I'm not so sure about that. I think a lot of that is context guessing. I don't know about you, but I think I probably use my mobile phone more in my house than I do actually in transit or on the go outside. And another thing I hear about is, oh, well, we need to keep content short and sweet. And I disagree with that too. If I have time available and I have my Android Galaxy S3, I'm perfectly happy and I want to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes reading my Kindle app or perhaps viewing a YouTube video. We can't assume that just because our learners are using a small screen, they're in a hurry, they're in a rush, they have 2 minutes to do something and then they're off doing something else. Yes, it's possible, but I don't think that it's something that we really need to always assume that just little bits and pieces. Give though learners the ability to view content at different sizes, right? Maybe there's some short and sweet stuff, but maybe there's some longer stuff, right? And Teresa, I think that's a good comment. Sometimes these phones have tremendous data plans, and it's a great opportunity to access information and content. So again, I think when I talk about mobile learning in a multi-device world, I think about ubiquitous learning, where anytime, anywhere you have access to learning materials or content that you want to learn about. It's situational. You often can access material at the time that you're trying to do something or at the time you're trying to solve a problem. It's also connected in terms of being able to access web services, being able to access colleagues and friends, social networks, and things like that. And finally, it's more personal because we tend to look at our mobile devices in a more personal way. We tend to relate to them in a different manner. And that, I think, is another element of mobile learning. Just reading a few comments here. And I noticed that Jeremy's sharing that he spends an hour on the train and uses Lynda training courses on my iPad. A great example, right? Where you're on the go, but that's a good solid hour that you have, right? So who's to say we should limit you to these bite-sized, content chunks of 5 minutes, right? Christina, thanks for sharing your comment. Tablet is mobile device for sure. Anything that relates to type and involves time of smartphone is too small. And that's another really interesting thing, thanks Teresa for sharing that comment, is that in the multi-device world, we also have to think about users shifting devices. You might start on a smartphone and maybe it's not optimized for the type of content you want to look at, so maybe then you go to your tablet. And then maybe you continue working and viewing your tablet, and then you go back to your laptop, or maybe go back to your smartphone. It can depend. So this actually is a good lead up to the next topic I want to talk about, and that is a set of multi-device experience goals. Because not only do you have to think about being on a smaller screen or different size screen, you have to think about people shifting devices as they do things with your Moodle course site. You want to make sure that there's conceptual and visual consistency when you're viewing your site on a smartphone to a tablet to a laptop, right? You want to think about having content and functionality parity. And this is something that I really heard back from my students. They don't want a crippled mobile version of something for their course. They want the whole shebang, right? They want to be able to access all the content, all the functionality of the course, no matter what device they're using. That's really an important factor. You want to be able to easily, seamlessly transfer between one device and the other, which is task transferability, even in the middle of a task, being able to do that. And thinking about ecosystem, in other words, that these things should be connected and that the state that you leave on one device should be transferred over or recognized on another device, right? And finally, trying to optimize physical interactions as much as you can on every device. So in other words, if you're going to be on a touch-enabled interface, try to optimize for those styles of interactions versus if you're on a desktop or a notebook with a keyboard, again, thinking about those styles of interactions with that kind of hardware. So that's a rough set of multi-device experience goals, and I'm just kind of reading a few comments here. The YouTube video sounds quite challenging. Jean-Marc has a great comment. Let the student make the choice. That's a great insight. So in other words, why are we or who are we to decide bite-sized bits versus a lot of content? Let the student make that choice. And also, yeah, some websites, you know what I really hate? I hate the websites that have the link at the bottom of the page called View Full Website when you're on a mobile phone. It's like a slap in the face. Give me all the content by the start on the mobile phone, not force me to change it to this full website view, and then all of a sudden, get another version of the website where I can find the things that I'm actually trying to look for. Okay, so another thing to think about is what are your learner experience goals for a multi-device delivery? And based on my experiences with my students over a 13-week course where they had a multi-device course companion, I kind of got these out of the students. They wanted to be engaging, they wanted the site to be organized, they wanted the site to be relevant, and they wanted to be appealing. And I think probably safe to say, all of you looking at that list, you'd probably say, yeah, that's probably in line with your own experiences. And really, that could be, you could just take out multi-device from that slide and just say, that's really the goal of any good learner experience. But this is something to keep in mind as we go through this case today I'm going to show you, is that I've really taken these to heart and I've tried to kind of make sure I'm on track with these learner experience goals as I design my multi-device course sites. All right, so let's take a little bit of a break here. So what have we covered so far? We talked about why I use Moodle in 2014, including things like, changing text strings or language customizations, including embedded objects like third-party HTML stuff, things like the collaborative nature of the glossary, which we're going to see in a little while in the case study. So there's lots of reasons why, from a learning perspective and an interface perspective, I found Moodle good for multi-device design above and beyond the fact that now Bootstrap is part of the core and that there are responsive frameworks for us to use or themes. We talked about the fact that multi-device support is pretty easy now, but there's a lot that we need to learn and try as we go through this change of viewpoint. I shared with you, a basic 5W, 1H kind of foundation strategy of doing multi-device learning. Talking about redefining mobile learning a bit in a multi-device world, thinking about things like being ubiquitous, situational, connected, and more personal. And then I shared with you some multi-device experience goals in terms of using different devices through completing one task, and also share with you some multi-device learner experience goals, again, formed based on the feedback of my own students. Your mileage may vary. Being, your multi-device course site should be engaging, organized, relevant, and appealing. So before I continue and take you on a guided tour of the multi-device Moodle site that I've created, are there any questions or comments? Feel free to enter them in the chat box, and I'll just give you a moment to think about what you've done so far, and see if you have any questions or comments before we continue. Thanks. Now, if you're interested, I will. Oh, got a comment here. Great, thank you. Let's see here. I guess I'm a teacher from control. Yeah, that's a really good point, Teresa. Again, the theme is actually the easiest part now. The trickier part, the harder part is, yeah, what do you put in that course now that it's multi-device friendly, and how that's going to change the relationship of your content to your students? Yes, thank you, Jean-Marc. Yeah, so again, I've learned a lot along the way myself from my students about what they would like to see and what they value in terms of multi-device course sites. And how do you, Christina, looking at your question, how do you deal with the content that can't be viewed on mobile? So, good question. So I guess what I do is I try to explore are there different ways for me to communicate that content that will work on all my devices? And if not, yes, the suggestion you have is what I would do. I would actually usually include the link to the content and the embedded content below. So that way, if a user is viewing it on a multi-device that supports the content, it's right in front of them. If they're using it on a device that does not support the content, at least there's a link right above that placeholder, then they can click on the link and then view the content. So trying to kind of solve that problem at the same time. So I hope that answered your question. I'm going to share with you right now, in case you happen to have a mobile device handy, I'm going to put in a URL for you. And in just a few minutes, we're going to go through this, and I'm just going to show you this course site on the desktop UI. You'll have to believe me that it does work on a mobile device. In fact, I'll just shorten that URL a little bit for you to make it easier. If you have a mobile device, feel free to get it out now and enter that URL, and hopefully the server is up, and you'll be able to take a look at that site on any device that you want to throw at it. But like I say, I'm going to focus on the desktop interface as I talk about things here. So let's start off with the main screen. And I'm going to give you a guided tour of a Moodle multi-device friendly site that I created for University of British Columbia here in Vancouver, Canada. There's the URL that I just put in the text box. And this is basically a course site for a 3-week face-to-face course that I kind of do a blended learning kind of approach to, and I complement my face-to-face sessions with this course companion, or multi-device course companion as I call it. This is what the main page looks like. You know, right away, one of the things that I try to do is I try to unmoodle Moodle. In other words, I try to come up with a design that I think is really meeting the goals of my audience, and that sometimes means I have to kind of change a fair bit the default appearance of my Moodle course site. In this case, for those of you who can kind of recognize it, I'm actually using the social format in an unstandard way. Social format allows you to display a list of form topics on your home page, but I actually kind of hijacked that format and hid the ability to actually create new topics at this level. And I'm using it as a way to provide placeholders for the various modules that I talk about in the course. So the students can see the main module topic. They can see the slides. This is, by the way, an HTML5 based slide program, so it's available on all devices, not Flash, which would be a problem on some devices. And you can see here that there's a link to jump to the discussion of the topic. So this unmoodling the Moodle page, and I don't mean anything, unflattery by that. I just mean that I just decided for the purpose of my course, especially if you're viewing this on a mobile device, you'll see what I mean. This really does translate fairly well to smaller screen sizes. And for my course, there are only 4 main topics, and those are the 4 main topics that you see there. So just to give you a little bit of an idea behind the scenes, obviously, I think I already mentioned this to you. I'm using the social course format. And so if you go down here, you'll see that fair enough, I have the social format chosen. And with just a little bit of, either PHP hacking or CSS stuff and all the CSS changes I did to the aardvark theme. By the way, I should mention, this is just the aardvark theme with some basic changes. That's going to be available on the course page of the iMoot site. So you can kind of sneak a peek. It's undocumented or uncommented. But anyway, the CSS is there for you to look at too. And you can do the same technique, by the way, with topics by creating hidden topics. So in other words, if you prefer the topics format, you can do something very similar that's very multi-device friendly. Instead of using the standard format of all these links, if you use the topics format and then you actually hide, you notice up here, fundamentals, access, design, build, this is how users navigate to the main pages. These are actually topic pages that are hidden on the front page, so users don't see that. Users only see the kind of HTML blocks that I choose for them to see when they get to the front page. Again, just trying to make it a little bit more effective in a multi-device environment. So you can Google, hiding topics or sections in Moodle and probably learn more about exactly how to do that. But that gives you a very close idea to what I'm doing with social format, hiding the ability to create new forms. Another thing that's important that I think you may have already noticed is that I want to bring content to users. You don't want just a string of text links. And so what I've done here is that because it's actually a form, this is actually a form post, and I have my HTML5 here. The HTML5 slides program that I use is at slides.com, and that allows you to make slide presentations based purely in HTML5, works across multiple devices, touchscreen friendly, just great stuff. So I'm able to actually embed the actual slideshow. You could actually go through that slideshow if you want to without even going to the slideshow page. And as well, you get the main topics of the module, and you can explore that topic more fully. But my point here is that I'm bringing it to the user. I'm bringing the content immediately to them. They don't have to click on something to view that. Now, how am I doing that? Because do you notice that there's an interactive object here, there's some text, there's a button. But this is where Bootstrap comes in, because not only does Bootstrap allow you to have a theme that's responsive, you can actually add your own HTML that will allow you to make your content more responsive and at the same time bring you some additional features. So here's my form editing screen, and you can see that in my form editor I have my visual HTML5 block and my text. But if I keep going and I look at the HTML, now I know this is a little bit of a blob of HTML, but trust me, what basically this is doing is this is using Bootstrap to present a nice little media preview on one side and text on the other. And really, if you look at the Bootstrap that you need to do it, it's very little Bootstrap needed, right? So all you need to do is define a class called media, add the standard classes and divs for a media preview. You can embed your HTML object there, and then your text, and it's done magically side by side, responsive viewing in terms of multiple screen sizes, resizing your screen. It's great stuff. So you can see, hey, that's not too bad. Like, that's not too much HTML to kind of add to your own page. And you can not just do it in Moodle pages, but you can also do it in Moodle form posts. And all of a sudden, form posts become this really interesting container for self-contained, multi-column, responsive content, far beyond just text. And so that's something I want to share with you so you can kind of see how you do that. And then in my one of my course pages, my fundamentals, you see here I've got various sections, and then I have 2 YouTube videos, and they're side by side, multiple columns. And when you resize this page, or if you're viewing it right now on your mobile device, you'll see automagically the YouTube videos will stack on top of each other, and you'll still be able to view each one on whatever screen you're looking at. And again, this is done courtesy of Bootstrap. And look at this, just a little bit of code defining one div class being a row that's fluid, defining the span widths or the widths of the 2 columns that you want to work with, and voila, you can have these either HTML text or images or YouTube videos automatically will adapt to different screen layouts, and you get a nice, easy way to do two-column layouts and more effectively use screen real estate on your larger screens as well, right? Instead of just one small video, you can actually have two next to each other for desktops, but if you view on a mobile device, they'll get stacked on top of each other. So again, a nice little example for you to see, wow, with Bootstrap, again, as an instructor, a little bit of Bootstrap, if you learn a little bit, you can really start to present nicer content as well on your course pages. Another thing that's, I think, really important once you do multi-device stuff is that you want to avoid users having to do authentication. I'm sure you will agree with me. Nothing is like the pleasure of entering a 12-character password on a mobile device to get into a site. Hard to beat that pleasure, isn't it? So what I decide to do is I try to make almost everything I can open in my multi-device Moodle site and only require authentication when I need it, right? And so what I've done is with Moodle user permissions, I was able to make almost everything public but one thing, and that was I only wanted students to be able to actually contribute to forums. But I wanted the public and students who aren't authenticated to be able to read forum posts. So working with Moodle's user permissions, you see here I'm not logged in, but yet I have a link to discuss the topic and how many replies are there. I can click on that. I can view the forum in detail. I can see the discussion. Notice I have not logged in yet. So you don't have to log in to view the discussions, but if you want to post a reply, that's when you have to log in. So again, on a mobile device, you want to avoid authentication whenever possible. And with Moodle user permissions, you have a lot of control over that, which is a great strength of the tool, I think. And so I was able to do this interesting mix of public and private content. Another thing that I found really helpful that I mentioned earlier is the glossary. And I don't know if those of you who have worked with the glossary before or not, but I was really quite amazed by the power of the glossary. And not just like as a way to put definitions of words. For me, I saw the power of the glossary being as a resource glossary, a way to include key articles and also key video resources and podcasts for my students. And so again, using the power of Bootstrap and using iframes as appropriate as well, being able to, and by the way, this is a little bit of Bootstrap magic right here, being able to kind of incorporate this idea of a glossary of resources for students to utilize. And the nice thing about this is that it's kind of like you have a combination of local and external resources because you have the titles of the articles and little snippets of the pages as local resources. The student can use the search, find resources that match a search term, let's say agile, and then once they see the results of that, then they can go and look at the external tools like the article, like the video about that certain topic. So that's really powerful, I think, and it works fairly well on multi-device environments. And furthermore, you can actually have students contribute and make comments on articles, on items in the glossary. So I'm just going to share a screen here. So let's see here. So here we're looking at the glossary with some samples. I'm just trying to find the right slide here for you. Here we are. And then once the student logs in, I'm just going to go back one screen here. Oh, Jeremy, does a lack of authentication not worry you? No, because I don't have anything that I worry about in terms of privacy. I haven't de-indexed the site on Google. Actually, my students asked me to make sure it's searchable and findable on Google. So, but I don't have any student grades on my Moodle site. I use another tool, to be honest. And the students know that everything they contribute in the discussions are public. So that way I'm trying to avoid any conflicts of interest between the student's privacy and the site being open. Hope I answered your question. Now, once the student logs into the site, though, they're also able to make comments on the resources if they perhaps would like to suggest or make a comment about how helpful or not the resource was. And in addition, the student can create a new entry. So this is a collaborative tool now where the students might, hey, I found this great article about Agile, and I'm going to add it to our course companion and share it with my classmates. So as you know, with the glossary, students can do this. They can click on Add a New Entry. Oops. And when they go to this screen, I use language pack customizations to change the titles of the object. So now the glossary name is called title, and the glossary description or definition is called content or preview. And so you can kind of see what I'm trying to do, trying to support the ability of students to kind of, oh, okay, I can clearly understand this is adding a resource to the glossary. So this language pack customization really can help kind of improve that. And since I did this, I have learned about the database tool, and I realized that there are other things I could use for this kind of approach. But basically, the glossary being collaborative, I think it's an amazing tool. And when you do a multi-device course site and you're trying to kind of when you're trying to do a multi-device course site and you're trying to increase like performance supportability, the glossary is a really nice method to do that. And yes, Teresa, that's right. I have learned that since. And because as an instructor hosting my own Moodle stuff, I only have to worry about it like on my own sites. And that's true. Language customization could affect other things, so you might have to use another technique for that. That's a good point, actually. Okay, so almost wrapping up here with the case study. Another thing that I'd like to share with you is because it's on their mobile devices, you want to open up communication channels, if at all possible, more. So I know Moodle has a built-in chat, but I prefer actually using a tool called Olark. Olark allows you to create a widget that's available on each and every web page, also on mobile presentation. And so anytime the student is looking at a course page, an assignment, content, whatever it might be, they can simply click on this little widget and get a little window. And in this window, if I'm online, they can immediately start a real-time chat with me one-on-one. And if I'm not online, they can send me a message from that instead of an email. And my students responded extremely well to this feature. They love the fact that at any time on any page, for any reason, they could initiate a one-on-one private chat with me and get me to help them in anything that's a challenge to them. And there's many ways to do this. And Jeremy, I noticed that there is, you're sharing a Bootstrap theme. Oh, I'd love to check that out. I will do that for sure. And so, yeah, this ubiquitous ability to engage with me at any time is something that I also found very helpful, again, especially in multi-device context. And finally, because no multi-device course site design is fairly new still to myself, I wanted to give my students the ability to give me critical feedback. And you know what? Sometimes students aren't feeling comfortable giving critical feedback. So I included an anonymous feedback form. So the student could click the anonymous feedback form, and using Google Forms, being able to send me their real thoughts on the course, the class, and also on the site, and not include their name, and it truly is anonymous, and I never know which student sent me anything. And I found this was quite helpful. I got some critical feedback during the term, but you know what? That made me a better instructor, and so I have no problem saying that. And also, I got some positive feedback through that means, but more it was critical feedback. And would I do that again? I certainly would. So I'd have the one-on-one kind of chat available on my multi-device course site, as you saw, and also some way of doing anonymous feedback. I think that's fairly important as well. So brave or stupid, there you go. But that's what I tried to do. And then finally, what's a really good exercise for you to do is once you've created your multi-device course site, to kind of take a whole bunch of screenshots and put them all together, kind of like what I'm doing here, and do it also for your mobile device screen sizes, and just kind of look at your design in its entirety and think about those 4 key multi-device learner experience goals we talked about. Is it engaging? Is it organized? Is it relevant? And is it appealing? Because again, based on my experience, that's the lens that my students look at this stuff by. And those are my guiding principles in terms of the learner experience I'm trying to produce. And it really helps me do it this way, to see multiple things at once and get a sense of, how am I doing? And then, of course, once the course starts and I start getting student feedback, lots of changes happen at that point. But this gets me at least to a good starting point. Okay, so what about the next steps for you before we have some more questions and comments? For sure, if you haven't installed Moodle 2.7, of course, there's actually a new Bootstrap theme in 2.7 called More, I believe. The default theme was Clean before, and Clean was introduced in 2.5. So if you've got Moodle 2.5 or above, you already have a Bootstrap theme or more to try out. Bass Brands was one of the developers involved in incorporating Bootstrap into Moodle, and that's his site, and he has some additional themes, including a Bootstrap 3, the newest version of Bootstrap you might want to check out. There are some links here to learn more about Bootstrap Framework itself, and I've also included a couple of links, one to Luke Wroblewski, who's a well-known mobile designer who actually wrote a book called Mobile First, which is a great book to kind of get your head wrapped around the mobile space. And that's a link to a presentation of his, and as well Team Treehouse. There's a great entry there, A Beginner's Guide to Responsive Web Design. All of these links are also on my course page in the iMoot site itself. So you don't need to copy the URLs, they're going to be there for you. And finally, I want to thank you for attending this session so far. I want to open up the space now for your questions and comments, and maybe Teresa can help me that out as well if you want to do it by mic, or if you want to just text your questions or comments, whatever you prefer is great. That's my contact info. I'm also on Twitter. I'm in the process of getting ready to work actually with the Canvas LMS as well, to see what it might do in terms of multi-device design. And the Moodle course site that I shared with you earlier is live, and you can feel free to explore that. And if you see something that really interests you and you're not sure how I did it, feel free to get in touch with me. You're welcome to do that as well. And lastly, there's a little bonus here. If you're Google Chrome users, in Google Chrome, you can actually create what's called a web app, which allows you to access your most frequent Google Chrome websites or applications from your desktop. And a really neat thing that you can do actually with Moodle, or actually any site, if you have the right code, is to actually add it to the Google Chrome App Store. So this is the multi-device course companion that you've been hopefully exploring on your mobile device. And you see here I actually have an entry of it in the Google Chrome Store. And I've done that just as another way for students to access the course companion easier, in particular on desktop and laptops. And Google's making noises of trying to bring over this kind of access onto their mobile devices too. So that's going to be something that I'm going to watch out for. So anyway, that's just a little bonus item there. But anyway, why don't I give you a moment to reflect about our session so far, and I'd love to hear any questions or comments that you have. So I'll give you a minute to think about that, and feel free to either text them or use the mic. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, and thank you, Paul. That was a great session. I was just thinking, can you hear me okay?
Kind of good to me.
Okay. Some of the Bootstrap code snapshots that you showed there, I can't find those in your slides that are on your course, so it'd be really good if you could skip back to those at some stage, or or pop them in your course, because that was really awesome. I think that was great, and others were saying in the chat that looked great as well.
Sure, I can try to add them on
Thanks,
the course page site, perhaps.
Yeah. Perhaps you updated your PowerPoint or your slides there. Awesome stuff. And I think now that we've all got your course, you might have some lurkers checking out that material. So let your students know that they've got a larger audience now, I think. So and as Paul said, folks, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat area there, or you can unmute your mic if you'd like to ask a question rather than typing it. Feel free. But Paul from the iMoot team, thanks again for presenting.
Sure thing. You're welcome. I'm looking forward to questions and comments here. Thanks. Natalie, I see your first question. Is the video you're embedding fixed with or fully responsive? Good question. So if you use a YouTube like embed iframe by default, it is fixed. But on the course page that I put on the iMoot site for this presentation, you'll be able to see that I added the aardvark file of the CSS customizations for aardvark. And on that, I believe I included a little wrapper for YouTube videos to make them responsive. And there's several different ways to do it. But to answer your question, it will be fixed unless you add a wrapper to it to allow it to be responsive. Well, thank you very much. I hope that helped you. What other questions or comments might be out there? I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you're seeing today. I should also mention that Bass Brands has a presentation, I think it's tomorrow, and Bass is going to touch upon some things that he's working on to really bring responsive elements to the next level in Moodle, so that might be something to check out. Oh yes, of course, professionally, I understand. You're welcome, Sarah, thanks. Any other questions or comments? And again, the site that I've shared with you is public and remains so, and you can always, view source and all kinds of other things, and you can also contact me if you see something in that site that you're not quite sure how it's done. I'm happy to share that with you.